Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Psychsoul Podcast, where we get positively psyched on analyzing what it looks like to live an epic lifestyle through psychedelic integration. Today's episode is dedicated to all my fellow coaches out there. Coaching on its own is really an interesting industry, isn't it? It is highly unregulated. Anyone can call themselves a coach. And in a field like psychedelic support, where we utilize incredibly transforming and potentially healing, potent and powerful, highly unpredictable, and I'm just going to call it absolutely risky consciousness medicines. Lack of regulation in our field, honestly, it's questionable and alarming. And it seems that people choose to become expert coaches on the exact topics that they themselves need coaching on. Does that sound familiar to you? It does to me. So I'm the first to call that I am one of those people. I started utilizing psychedelics regularly and with specific intention a full decade ago, with intention for psychospiritual healing. And at that time, the field was barren. I mean, you would Google psychedelic integration and two results would come up. There were no groups in Los Angeles, there were no meetups. And honestly, at the time, I was convinced that I was put on the planet to help people heal through psychedelics. And I had lots of good intentions, but no skill sets. And while I immediately enrolled in training programs and coaching programs and literally carved out my psychedelic training path, I was still lacking mentorship. I was lacking lived experience. And most importantly, I was lacking embodied integration, right? And I wanted to become an integration coach. So I believe that anyone that is either already a psychedelic healer or coach or wants to become one, this episode will be highly informative and supportive to your professional development, because our guest today is a well-revered luminary in the coaching industry in general and in the psychedelic coaching field in particular. We've known each other for a few years now. And before I formally introduce him, just a quick disclaimer. Per usual, our podcast is for educational purposes only and does not condone the use of illicit substances or partaking in any illegal activities. Of course, if you make a choice to engage with these powerful substances, please do so mindfully. Yannick Jacob, hi, how are you?
Hey, Shiri, it's good to be with you. I'm positively psyched.
Positively cycling. That was especially for you. I always choose an introduction based on my guest. Yeah, it's amazing to see you again. Let me just do a quick spiel so people can understand you a little bit better.
Sure.
You're an existential coach, double masters, and positive psychologist, supervisor, and trainer. Formerly the program leader of the MSc Coaching Psychology at the University of East London. Yannick now teaches at Cambridge University and the International Center for Coaching Supervision. And since 2018, Yannick has been exploring the intersection between coaching and psychedelics and has been instrumental in taking the conversation over ground. This is so huge. I definitely want to chat with you about that, Yannick. You're also a podcast host and an author and a psychedelic community organizer, and you just love exploring the big questions of life and living.
I sure do.
Well, I'm intrigued. What is one of those big questions of life that you love exploring?
Oh, where do we start? Who am I? Is just there, right? I mean, I listen to my own biography quite a bit, right? Because I do have these kind of conversations. And what's a biography? Like, what's a little spiel? Like, how can you really sum yourself up in 200 words? Like, there's some, like, if 100 people listen to this, there's 100 different ideas of who I am based on what you just said, right? And now people heard me speak for a minute, and that gives people a bit of a vibe, but like, well, who am I really? And who am I going to be tomorrow? Who was I yesterday? Who am I going to be in 5 minutes? I mean, we change and evolve all the time. And yet, this question of who am I, my sense of identity, the framework, the narrative I tell myself, the story I tell my other people and myself about myself, that's pretty defining. It gives us a place in the world, and it affects the decisions that we make, the choices we make, how we relate to other people. It's just, so who am I is underlying all the things we talk about and all the things we do. And in coaching, people often come to make choices or decisions, navigate themselves in their career in some way. And so that question of who are you is always there, whether we pay attention to it or not. So
Hmm.
that's one of the big existential questions that is, in a way, unanswerable, but so important to explore if we want to make more conscious and intentional decisions.
Absolutely. Wow. Just this opening introduction was like a ceremony right now. It was like an activation. Who are you and who are we? What are we? And this is, I feel, on the path of integration is probably one of those guiding questions that are like the North Star of our journey, right? Because it's really the
Mm,
quest to understand what we're made of, what are our values, what are our beyond the thoughts and beliefs, like who are we without the stories? So thank you
mm.
for that.
I would, can I just throw in, because the existential lens, I think, is so helpful because it offers you an and possibility for acceptance that maybe I cannot answer that question. Maybe I can find answers, maybe I can construct something, but really, who are you is a constantly evolving answer. So I see so many people hold on to trying to find an answer or having created one and then holding on to it for too long and still thinking they're the person that they were 10 years ago. Right. And that's the same with so many other uh, just inevitable aspects of the human condition, right? We can never reach certainty on anything. We can feel certain momentarily, but like there isn't an overarching certainty we can reach. That we cannot ever fully belong somewhere. We're always in this tension and conflict in some way, just because we're human beings. We can have moments and sometimes periods of time where everything feels aligned and we feel quite enlightened and we feel we've found ourselves now a place in the world. We know exactly what we want and what we're here for. But usually that's temporary, right? And so I like the existential lens because it invites people to appreciate that these answers are evolving and that the big questions in life, they don't have one answer. You can maybe create your answer and held on to that, but it's different for everyone. That's why I cannot know things. I can know things for myself, perhaps, but when I'm working with people, it's really all about them. So I cannot teach really. I cannot offer you answers to the big questions. I can only hold space for you to figure that out. And I love my work with psychedelics just because there's such powerful insights and door openers and mirrors of your own mind that can lead to a conversation that you help you create some of those answers, at least for some time.
And how do you feel like all the idea of existential coaching? This was such a beautiful overview of
Mm.
what existential coaching can look like. How do you feel this is related to psychedelic integration?
Mm. I think it really depends on who's coming for integration. What I've seen, that's why I wanted to have that conversation and explore the intersection, is that so many profound experiences and profound insights and learning get wasted because they're not integrated. People come back from ceremonies and experiences and something had profoundly shifted. But then 6 weeks later, they fall into their old habits and their old patterns and, their old grooves of thinking, which is understandable. I don't blame anybody for that. But you have to put the work in. Otherwise, it often just reverts back to what life was. You go back into an unchanged environment, even as a changed person, and chances are things go back to what they were. So I think it's important, it's crucial to get the most out of such experiences. And a lot of coaching, traditionally is maximizing impact and outcomes and results. And even from that perspective, like integration is just such a crucial step. For me, it was a no brainer that people need some space holding to figure out, okay, I've had a profound learning and an insight. What can I do with this now? And that goes beyond healing, right? I think as a coach, I kind of stay away from healing. I know there's a big conversation around, well, often healing, the coaching itself is a healing space, right? People often heal, but if that's uh, the intentional outcome of that kind of journey, I think therapists do a better job, right? Coaches, as you say, it's unregulated space. It takes a lot of skills to hold that kind of space to help someone heal. So, in order to start the conversation about what coaching could contribute, I think it's helpful to kind of separate people who seek healing and people who are already quite well. People who are in coaching, we say resourceful and whole and creative. People who are quite okay. They're able to manage life and navigate careers and make a living, but they want to grow. They want more. They want insights. They want transcendence. They want more meaning. But it's not that they're in a hole and they're broken and they need fixing or healing. So that's where I started the conversation. I don't mind if coaches who bring the necessary skill set to help someone heal and the presence and the experience to do that and to cross boundaries. I've always been into integrative practice, right? But to start the conversation of what's the place for coaching in the psychedelic journey from preparation to integration, I think there's a lot of people who don't feel broken at all and who are very well able to think in very complex ways and that, but help them to make sense of what the hell just happened and who am I now and how am I going to show up differently? How do I get other people on board with who I am now? How do I navigate relationships or work or career? Maybe wait a little before you quit your job and completely shift your career. Maybe let's think this through. Not throwing a spanner in the works, but just a lot of coaching is about making conscious, intentional decisions. So I think that's how it was natural for me to combine the two. If you have the kind of right client for it, given that there's such a huge range of coaches and how deep they are willing and able to go. Well, some countries are more regulated than others, and some countries need to be very, very careful what kind of services to offer and to whom, so you don't cross the bridge to therapy. But I think offering spaces for people to think and feel and make sense of an experience and then move on, it's the same in the psychedelic space than it is in other coaching engagements that I've had. Whether you get fired or you come out of a relationship or you had a profound experience skiing down a mountain and at high speeds, you had this insight and this experience. There's a lot of altered states in life. They don't have to be psychedelic, but making sense of an experience and then offering a space to figure out how am I going to move forward now that I feel different. That's just such incredible value for people.
Okay, this is such wisdom. And I have a question regarding your view of leaving the healing to the therapist. What can psychedelic coaches do in the very likely situation that their high functioning client that came in again for creative pursuits, redesigning their life,
All of a
not for
sudden.
not for trauma healing whatsoever, right? And all of a sudden they have trauma related insights. How can the coach intercept that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because we cannot, regardless of what screening process we apply, some of it we can catch, right? Having a conversation about it before they have an experience and come to you for integration. You can, as a skilled coach, you can sense that there's some trauma at play and explore that a little bit before you throw something like psychedelics in the mix and really blow the doors open on it. You know, but you cannot filter it all, right? Some people are quite guarded. Sometimes the trauma is very hidden. And sometimes it takes something like a psychedelic experience to really open that door. So there's a couple of things we can do. First of all, is make sure that that person is reasonably okay, right? Sometimes people are in crisis and we need to have a skill set that we can make sure that they're not leaving, driving home, are in emotional distress, right? We can maybe offer some signposting, help them, even if we can't refer them to a particular therapist that we know and trust. I would encourage every coach to have a referral network, especially if we work with powerful substances. If you don't know anyone, just look them up. There's plenty of directories now. Just Google, talk to some therapists. They will be quite happy to talk to coaches who are willing to refer clients to them. So you can get to know people. And even if you don't, just know what your limits are. Know how far you're willing and able to go. I know, and I'm sure you know, some perhaps overconfident coaches who want to go into depth, but without the necessary skill set and presence behind it. There's so much unconscious projection and transference going on. With the best intentions, I think there's a lot of coaches out there who put their clients at risk because they want to continue to help them when actually the best way of helping them would be to let them go, find someone who's better suited to help them. Right? So have a referral network or learn the skill of referral in a way that the client doesn't feel abandoned, but they feel even better supported. That you care about them and their well-being so much that you're willing to stop working with them. So that's self-awareness, that's training, it's learning how to refer people, it's knowing some people you could refer them to, perhaps, and yeah, perhaps do a mental health first aid course or something like that. That if somebody really is plunged into a crisis, which is usually what happened during the experience, but when people come to the integration, it'll be a couple of hours at the very least, but most likely a couple of days or weeks after the experience. And by that time, that kind of crisis is unlikely to be there. But if you open something that really needs somebody more skilled or somebody more specialized, don't hold back to have that conversation and make it clear before you start working with people that your coaching can only go so far. And you don't need to know exactly how far. But it's important that before you start working with somebody, they know that you also have a limit. You cannot work with everybody on everything. Nobody can. Some people can go further than others, but I always say I can't quite put my fingers on where exactly the line is. But what I can tell you is I get this particular feeling in my stomach that tells me I'm approaching a zone where I'm out of my depth, where you'll be much better off working with somebody else. And when that time comes and I get that feeling or you get that feeling, let's speak up. Let's trust each other to say, have that conversation. Remember way back when I said, I think we can only go so far? I think we're approaching that. So if you want to continue to have that conversation, which sounds like an important conversation to have, maybe explore having that with somebody, maybe weekly, maybe somebody with a specialty, you know? So negotiating the boundaries, being aware of it, and consistently asking yourself the question, am I still the right person to work with here?
Absolutely. And this is so incredibly important. One thing that has been coming up for me in the years, again, this decade that I've been in the field, and also eventually creating my own coaching certificate program, is in back in the day where literally there weren't integration coaching certificate programs
Mm.
aside from one, being true to you. This was 2019, 2020. And I remember creating that program. And of course, like, it was very attractive because, again, nothing else like that existed. And with all the excitement, there were also a lot of questions like, what do you mean we need to pay thousands of dollars for a psychedelic training program? The mushrooms can teach us everything we know.
Mm.
I can offer support even though I'm not trained. A lot of questions about the necessity of training, which I think they're legitimate, because really
Mm.
the idea, or one of the ideas of the psychedelic renaissance, is to continuously review outdated systems that have
Mhm.
gotten us to needing all the support in the first place, but without replicating these ill systems, without replicating capitalism, without replicating authoritative power dynamics and differentiation, like sometimes the medical model can seem like that, without replicating a
Mm.
reductionist, solely science based model. Because we know that, again, there's the wisdom of the plants, the wisdom of the people, the wisdom of nature, and so many elements that we understand need to be incorporated in these new earth models. So, my question to you is this: What would be your advice for individuals who are questioning the necessity of psychedelic support trainings and who want to offer professional level psychedelic support?
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you because it speaks to an intention to help, to hold space, to be of service, right? I recognize the calling to, especially after you experience something like this. Um, Often for the first time, people really feel a strong drive to open this up for other people too. I've seen coaches with no formal training hold an incredibly powerful space, super present. They've gone through their experiences. They have tons of experience being in a relationship with other people. From a very early age, they've been holding space for people and learned to listen, right? So I've seen coaches with tons of formal training being incredibly unaware of how they bring their own processes into the space and just guide and advise and consult and mentor when really what they claim to do is coach and facilitate and not be judgmental and bracket their own assumptions. So training isn't necessarily a deciding factor or an instrumental factor for am I doing good work. That said, I think training has made almost everyone who's gone through it better, even if they disagree with the training. It somewhere between invites you and forces you to take a good look at what you're bringing, how you're doing things, critically reflecting on your assumptions, your underlying assumptions, your theoretical, your philosophical framework. I mean, how many coaches I talked to and asked them about their theoretical and philosophical framework, and they had never really thought about it. They just do everything out of intuition.
Right.
And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people are intuitively just really doing the right thing. But what I've noticed over the years training and supervising so many other coaches is that the intuition of those who've gone through these processes, usually through training or through supervision, through critical reflection on their own practice, through experimenting with stuff in safe environments, taking things out, getting assessed, having to study for exams or submitting videos, you know, you really develop a different level of intuition because your intuition is
Yeah.
now based on all the models and all the frameworks that you've internalized. I now coach differently than I coached 10 years ago. 10 years ago, some of the models that I use now very naturally felt clunky and formulaic. Now they're second nature and I know what's at work. So I think that's where training comes in really handy. And I totally hear what you're saying. And I think there's truth in that. There's institutions and there's gatekeepers that in the therapy space, for example, you just have to go through so much. You need to pay so much money. You need to get you need to be part of the club. And not everybody can afford that. Actually, very few people can afford to become therapists and train this much and spend all these years in supervision. So I understand why people are critical of institutions such as that. Professional coaching bodies, some of them have similar tendencies, right? To you have to pay all this money for individual accreditation now, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything, and clients don't necessarily care about it, you know. But at the same time, I have mixed feelings, yeah, of regulation. On one level, it really keeps clients safe because you go through a regulation, like through accreditation process, for example, and you can be reasonably sure that at least somebody has sat through those trainings,
Right.
and is aware of those competencies, has learned the rules at some point, even though later on they chose to break them. Nobody drives a car now like they learned how to drive the car for the assessment, for the exam. Um, so I think it's a good thing that people go through training. I think it's also a good thing that not everybody has to go through training. As an existentialist, I'm very critical of authority, right? And I've always been quite rebellious to rules. Uh, I believe the most important thing is that every coach out there, everybody who works with people, develops appropriate ethical and moral principles and frameworks, aware of their skills and critical of how far and they're willing to go, willing and able to go with people. conscious about when have you reached the limits of what's good for this person, and able to see that. So I think we have to do our own work, and that's not just acquiring coaching skills through an expensive training. It's a lot more than that.
Absolutely. I know that even though there is so much diversity in the way that we can approach psychedelics and psychedelic therapy and how to hold space and how to serve the medicine, how to do integration work, there are still some foundational under
Mm.
teachings that I believe we can all agree on, which you said safety. And, there is the number one rule is do no harm,
Yeah.
right? And at the very least, you have to understand this rule and to do this, to go on this inner transformational journey on your own, to be able to review how relational dynamics operate within yourself and how they can affect your clients.
Mm.
And this is not something that can be done, I believe, cannot be done on your own because by nature, relational dynamics, it's a dynamic that happens between
Yeah.
two people, two individuals. So having that type of dedicated system for that self inquiry, and I feel really it's at its best when the program is designed to be able to take you on that transformational
Mm.
journey. And like you said, at the end of the day, to turn you into a better person. And specifically, because integration is our topic of the day, if it's going to turn you into a psychedelic integration coach, I hope to God that it's going to take you through a psychedelic integration journey so
Mm.
you can learn through embodied experience what psychedelic integration is. And then you will be able to translate what that feels like to your clients. Raise your hand if psychedelic medicines have changed your life. Raise both hands if you are a cisgender female that wants to serve in the psychedelic renaissance as an integration coach, a healer, or a psychedelic therapist, but has no idea where and how to begin. Soul Sister, welcome home to the Psyched Souls Integration Coaching Certification Program for Visionary Women. Our best-selling 6-month professional training and personal development program where you get to dive deep into your own integration practice way beyond meditation and journaling while getting certified as a high-caliber psychedelic integration coach and guide. In our iconic program, you do your work through an experiential, creativity centered, and system rebelling transformational vortex that is grounded in proven methods and expert level technologies, preparing you to take root as a psychedelic leader in your community. You have full intention to participate in this revival, and we provide you with the know how, with the tools, and with a full body confidence to create it. So, if you are a psychedelic informed woman with a huge heart of service that is ready to get off the fence and unapologetically step out into the world offering psychedelic support, stop playing small sister, take a leap into your soul aligned, paradigm shifting service career in the psychedelic revival and help spread more light consciousness in the world. Learn more and apply at psychsoul.com/training.
Yeah, and one issue I see out there when people either circumvent training or just go kind of off the coaching path. Coaching can mean so many things, right? What I see that a lot of people regard coaching still as this: coach me through this, tell me how it's done, give me advice, give me information, guide me, take me by the hand, right? There's this picture of that's often used for coaching where someone's already on the mountain and they're reaching out and helping somebody up the mountain. And that's, I mean, I can't say what coaching is and isn't. I don't have that authority, right? I see a lot of coaches who really do fantastic work bringing in information and taking somebody by their hand and guiding them through an integration process. That's incredible value. So, but I think what we need to keep in mind that the more we bring ourselves into the space, the more responsibility we carry in where that person is going. So, on a purely facilitative level, which many coaching buddies claim coaching should be, right?
Yeah.
It's facilitative. It's what you're not bringing yourself in. You're focusing on the client, your view of the world, your philosophical framework, your what you believe is right and wrong. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that you hold space for that person to find themselves. As we find ourselves in relationship, it's difficult because we're always creating something together, right? We're always resonating. But if that's one side of the spectrum, not bringing myself in at all, not bringing my own knowledge, my own opinions, my own assumptions in at all. And on the other side, we are guiding people, we are teaching them something about how the world works and how people work, how the brain works, or how psychedelics work, right? Then we're bringing a lot of ourselves in. And the more we bring our own knowledge in and our own worldviews and our own beliefs, the more responsibility we take that that also applies to that person in front of us and that it will be helpful to them. And it's not an issue if you choose your clients very wisely, if they're often clients gravitate to coaches who are very similar to them. But you take a lot of responsibility. So I stopped judging coaches who do a form of coaching that I think is barely coaching anymore. But in the end, who am I to judge? And a lot of people find it really valuable. I still get asked by clients, tell me, how does this work? How should I enter the experience? What should I do to integrate? And while I have some information I can put on the table, I have some processes for integration, but I don't think there's an integration process that works for everybody. There's not a one size fits all solution. Some people like to journal after an experience. Some people like to, record voice messages to their phone. Some people like to paint, or some people like to talk to other people. So it's really difficult to give advice on how to make the best out of your experience or how to integrate in the best way. It really depends on who that person is in front of you, how they learn, who they are, how they think. Are they very visual? Are they very analytic? Are they very cognitive? Are they deeply religious? Are they completely agnostic? So it's a new way of being with someone every single time. But yet there's so many people out there who say, this is how you integrate, and here's my
Yeah.
10-step process, and here's my training to become a psychedelic integration course coach in 6 weeks. I know your program offers a lot, puts a lot of information on the table, helps people to find their own style, and you make a lot available for people to then engage with it and bring people together and talk about it. That's people need to form. It takes a long time to form as a coach and as a practitioner. It's not something you can do after a weekend or two, or after a psychedelic experience or two.
No, exactly. And it's interesting because, on the one hand, I do believe that in a field like psychedelic integration that is so novel, right? Like, we are literally, people like you, people like myself, and many other people who have been in the psychedelic renaissance for a long time and have literally been trying to interpret and translate this new language and outline it
Mm.
and offer theories and methods. And because of the situation that we have, that we're borrowing, some people would say appropriating, right,
Mm.
ancient modalities and technologies and traditions that were cultivated in environments that did not require psychedelic integration. They had the community council, they had their tribe, they had their initiations, they had all these rituals, and they still do, instilled in their social structures. And yet we're literally attempting to extract, and I'm specifically using that word because we live at a time where there are literally companies that attempt to extract a psychedelic experience without a bad trip. So many people are so desperate to heal because the medical system has failed them. And they're come knock, knock, knocking on this, again, ancient modality that is literally being stripped down to the bare bones of something that who knows if it's even going to be effective, like in this way. Again, just like stripping down the molecule without education, with all the harms of the war on drugs, without having community structures in place, without even like being able to go to their therapist freely and
Mm.
asking them questions, without being fearful of being labeled as crazy or erratic, or participating in illegal activities. There's I feel like psychedelic integration is like being developed, right, to answer, to bridge that gap, basically, right?
Yeah, and
um
it's understandable. That's what science does. It takes something out of context into the lab, it studies it in isolation, and then hopefully through a scientific process that usually takes a very long time, reintegrated into the larger whole of what we know, right? And we're just still at the very beginning of that of that journey, right? And that's why it was so important to me that I call for more research on this. I'm coming from an academic background, right? There's more to knowing things than research and empirical study. We can know things in so many different ways. But research will allow us to have more of a conversation and more of an informed conversation. And it allows us to have conversations with people who otherwise would have not listened. Right. So I really value the research that it's out there and the evidence is out there, as limiting as it is and as disconnected to some of what it's learning is relevant as it is. Right. So there's more scientists to understand. We need to research ayahuasca, for example, within the context in which that's taking place, rather than extracting the component and then injecting it to somebody who's in a lab. That's going to give you a very limited knowledge. But it's give you some knowledge, right? We now understand so much more about what it's actually doing in the brain. So that's really helpful. But there's so much more to what's happening in the brain, because the brain is in interrelation with its environment at all times. So
Right.
there was literally no study, and there still isn't any published academic paper that is about coaching and psychedelics in combination. So happy we got ours published. It's going to come out in August 2024 in a reputable journal. So it's been a couple of years to write on that.
Congratulations.
But
This is huge.
hopefully it will inspire more research and saying, well, here's how coaching and psychedelics make sense. Here's why it's helpful to get curious about how this might work. Because on the one hand, it's already happening, right? There's already coaches out there offering their services to clients preparing for integrating psychedelic trips. There's more and more users out there. But also, if we take a coaching stance, a positive psychology stance, obviously there's so many more people who are not suffering than people who are suffering. When everybody's suffering in some ways, but the clinical population for which the current research is aimed at, it's a small population of people, compared to all the people in the world. So there's way more people who are relatively okay, not clinically suffering. And there's so much potential for them to live more in accordance with themselves and with the world and with other people. And we really need that sort of consciousness shift that comes from people being more in touch with themselves and connecting to a greater whole. So I think that's what it can contribute. But extracting something and studying it, well, that's just part of the process. And I really hope that we can accelerate this process a little bit more, so that we can make these not just medicines, but also these ways for people to shift consciousness more available. And whether they do that in a small way to just figure out their career, or whether they do it in a huge way by trying to figure out climate change and how we can do something about it. Um, I think that's up to the person who's using these substances as an instrument, as a tool, as a way to connect more with themselves and the world. So even hearing myself describing them as a tool is weird, but they can be. It's just like meditation, right? Meditation, if you hear it described as a powerful way to be in charge of where your attention goes, then Buddhist monks would turn in their graves. That meditation isn't for anything. It's just to be there.
Right.
But in the West, we've used meditation as a way to connect more, to learn more, and it's really helpful. And I think psychedelics take on a similar shape, that they're being used, and anything that's used can also be abused.
Yes.
Yeah, I said a lot. Let me
Exa-
pause there. I wonder
Yeah,
where you're
yeah.
taking this.
Wow. No, this is, and it's interesting. I had like this whole list of questions, but we like literally just talked through every single one of them without me even like asking them directly. It's incredible. I think the distinction of the word using psychedelics is a very important one, because really what you're describing is a form of extraction. We are using, and it seems to me like it's not. It's like an imbalanced relationship. And what are your thoughts about being in right relationship with the medicine and why it can be important right now?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a window also in my stance towards psychedelics, right? I have somewhat materialistic views about psychedelics, just in terms of I don't necessarily think that there's the entity that's the mushroom, that's where you're downloading wisdom from. I do think there, as it translates psychedelics, mind manifesting, right? That it's showing you, in a way, it's a window to your unconscious. I do believe that it helps you to connect to something much larger than you, but I think that's as part of feeling part of an ecosystem where everybody's connected necessarily, right? That's not from a spiritual or religious perspective. So that's why I'm probably more inclined to use psychedelics as something that can help you see things, like a magnifying glass. Stanislav Grof famously he compared it to the microscope for biology and the telescope for astronomy, right? So there's a relationship. You can say I connect with psychedelics and I connect with something that's much bigger than me. I connect with an entity, or I connect with a power, or connect with an energy. There's many ways in which you can relate to psychedelics. So as a coach, to me, that's not relevant. What's relevant to me as a coach, if I don't offer guidance, right? Or my own perspective. I want to keep my own views kind of to myself. I'm sharing them here, which probably means that other people connect with me, people who maybe already agree with me. But as a coach, it really doesn't matter if you're able to bracket your own stuff and keep it in the box, because what's important is that I help I help that person seeking psychedelics, seeking something from or through psychedelics, to explore what is my relationship with psychedelics, what is my relationship with what might happen, what is my philosophical or spiritual stance in the world, what do I believe in? And if somebody believes that they're a tool, chances are they're not going to meet the aliens. They're just
You
going
think
to,
so?
I
Do
think they
you?
might, yeah, I think they might see some aliens and they might think, oh, that's interesting. What are you doing in my mind? What do you have to teach me? But they're aware that these are manifestations of their own mind rather than actually the aliens that they're meeting. So I find it fascinating how different people relate to psychedelics in vastly different ways. That's part of the fascination of what's happening there for people. But yeah, I mean, I have my own personal views, but when I work with somebody, that don't really matter because I don't know what the truth is. Nobody knows.
Right. And language is so incredibly important, not just in the way that we dictate reality, but in the way that we are creating these new social realities as well, right? So I've actually like thought a lot about that word used, again, using psychedelics, because to me it does not feel or emanate the type of equalized relationship, reciprocal relationship,
Mm.
but benevolent relationship that I believe we can and should have with this modality. I wonder if you have any suggestions for other words that we can use, other terminology.
Yeah. So, in a way, it reminds me of how people talk about coaching, right? Because coaching is often portrayed as this service provision. I hire a coach, so now they work for me, or I'm using a coach, or I'm doing a coaching, or I partner with a coach, or I partner with my clients. I'm s- I'm being with someone, and we're spending time together. Same thing can apply to psychedelics, right? Some people might want to use psychedelics for something that's just first and foremost interesting, and I want to explore that a little bit more. No judgment. But somebody else might want to. I heard a friend of mine call it seek advice from an old friend. He hadn't done psychedelics in 20 years. and he was going through something that was really challenging, and he wanted to seek the advice of an old friend, and I thought that was so beautiful, right? Spend some time with my mother ayahuasca, or spend some time with the mushroom and see what happens. Connecting with psychedelics, visiting my friend the toad. There's so many ways in which people can talk about psychedelics, and I think as coaches it's really helpful to pay attention to how people talk about it, because it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong way to engage psychedelics, I think. you know I, I'm sure you can argue that there is, but that's always coming from a moral or ethical position. And when somebody approaches me as a coach, I want to keep that in my box. I can still make a decision after a consultation that, hey, this person clearly wants to use/abuse psychedelics in order to be more productive at engaging in a capitalistic system, and I don't want to support that. So I would still hopefully not judge them, but on some level I do. But then I might recommend that they're probably a better coach for them, that's more aligned with supporting their mission. I would probably have that feeling that I have if I don't really want to work with a client. I could do the job, I could bracket my stuff, and I could do the skill set and then help that person do whatever they want. But I also want to be resonating with my clients. It's nicer work. So I think the most important thing is to be curious about how that person is relating to psychedelics, not necessarily that I think that's right or wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thought about, again, which verb to use, right? And I love that partnering aspect, right? So
Hmm.
a word that or rather, yeah, co-creating. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
single word, or how it's structured, like grammatically in that sense. But the word co-creating has been like really big for me in relation to psychedelics, because, and especially with clients, and here's why. Because I do feel similar to you that when you said, okay, I have a coach and they're not partnering with a coach, but I have a coach and they need to do this and this for me or show me this and this. And basically, like, it seems to me like a lot of people that come not just to psychedelic coaches, but to the psychedelic modality in general, they approach it with just completely misplacing their power onto the hands of their shamans or facilitators, the psychedelic itself, the mushroom, the medicine told me this, the people in the ceremony, the therapist, and they forget, they're asked to completely surrender as a type of like myth in our culture, which we're not going to talk about it in this episode, but I have like huge beef with the word surrender in psychedelic experiences.
Oh.
Um, but we're not going to get into that now. So, using the word co creating is a means of encouraging the client to remember that, just like you said, Yannick, like this is amplifiers of you said amplifiers of the mind. I'm going to say amplifiers of the soul, amplifiers of the psyche, amplifiers of the inner healing intelligence, the inner intelligence that you
Hmm.
have within yourself that is connected with the source of all things, with source consciousness. But this is all your wisdom. This is all you. And it's really, I feel like the medicines as tools, as amplifiers, as microscopes, they're channels to the divine that is within you. And we must remember that this is a co-creative process. This is a dance. We are dancing with these tools. We're inviting these tools. We actually give these tools. I'm going to argue about this maybe in another episode. Again, maybe we should have you back on, Yannick. um, but I just also, there's another thing I'm grappling with, that actually, what if it's us as humans that provide full and complete expression to these plants and to these mushrooms? Because without us, without our physical vessel, their consciousness doesn't get expressed fully and completely.
Hmm.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
So it is.
what
It
if
is.
what if they're using us just as much as we're using them? That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, I love the word co-creation, because that example like illustrates, and it's the essence of a lot of coaching. It's the essence of that partnership. Partnership is co-creating. when we talk about psychedelics, it's interesting because that kind of implies that there is an independent, autonomous something there that we're co-creating with. And again, it speaks to your spiritual stance on this, right? And I appreciate that. And in some ways, I would really like to believe that. I've it's more comforting that there's an energy like that out there that, in some ways, has its own will or something. you know, I wish that to be there. That would be nice. Amplify is also a beautiful word. So I would encourage people to ask themselves what their relationship with psychedelics are, because it really will affect what you're getting from the work. How much power are you giving away? How much responsibility are you giving away? It's incredibly empowering. This is very existential, right? It's incredibly empowering to know that the answers are within you and that whatever wisdom is created in that space, it's actually coming from me. It's not something that somebody else is giving me, and I couldn't have done it without that other party. No, that's incredibly enabling. But at the same time, it's also scary because now the responsibility is on me. Maybe it's easier to believe that I got external wisdom, and if it doesn't work, I can blame the external wisdom for not being wise enough or giving me wrong information. So existentialists encourage us to acknowledge that the essential freedom that we all experience as human beings comes with the flip side, which is responsibility. And some people wear responsibility like a badge of honor, and for others, it weighs them down incredibly heavily. So it's nice to know that there's somebody looking out for you that is not you, that is a warm mother or a wise mushroom. But I do believe that most of this is you, maybe in partnership with an imagined or a real entity. Doesn't really matter in the end. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't. What matters is, how do you make sense of that, and how do you move forward with your life? It's not my goal or to change anybody's beliefs about there being an entity out there that's looking out for us, or a god, or a life energy that is affirming, or that the aliens are there. I don't care to change your beliefs. I just want to help you understand your beliefs and consciously and intentionally choose a way forward with those beliefs, aligning with those beliefs. Sometimes beliefs change in the process, but I really hope that I didn't have anything to do with that. I just want to reflect that back and help somebody make sense of who they are now that their beliefs have changed. And it can be really difficult if somebody falls off religion or all of a sudden becomes religious. I met someone who crossed the street, and on the other side of the street, he was a Christian. And he's like, oh, fuck, what's happening? I was always super critical. And now I had an experience that I can no longer deny. So they changed now. They're Christian now. And they grappled with that. And then they really leaned into it. But they had a good coach in their life as well. so, but yeah, what fascinating journeys, regardless of what beliefs you come in with or come out with, but having a space to figure that out. I wish all people had that.
That feels like a beautiful prayer to summarize today's episode with. And I wonder if you're open to completing our episode with a rapid fire round, 5 epic facts about
Definitely.
you.
Ooh, yes, hit me.
Okay. What is your favorite psychedelic?
I've had a synthetic mescaline that was just jaw dropping. It was so beautiful. I've never found out exactly what it was, unfortunately, but that was just amazing.
Incredible. Favorite thing to do after a ceremony?
Sit with the experience and let it settle.
What's one big lesson psychedelics have taught you?
Oof. I could see the core of my family before it came into existence, and it I was able to drop a lot of the fear of the commitment and the responsibility and really tune into the massive ball of love that was growing inside my hands.
Who is one dead or living person that you would sit in ceremony with?
My daughter. She's 2 right now, so it's gonna be a while. So not now. It's gonna, at
Oh
some
my
point
God.
in the future, I think that would be such an amazing experience. If
Oh.
she was so inclined, who knows? If she Googles me, I might have a problem, but we'll, we'll see.
Beautiful. And what's your secret to living epic?
Oh, my secret to living epic. Um, is learn to embrace the inevitable paradoxes, dilemmas, inner conflicts, and anxieties we carry just as a result of being alive and in a world with others. If we can learn to embrace the tensions as what creates energy, then I think we might have found a key to being happy forever. But we need to reposition ourselves what it means to be happy.
Amen to that. Thank you so much. So much medicine wisdom pouring through. And Yannick, tell us about how people can connect with you, and also tell us about the coaching lab.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have 3 websites that might be interesting to people. My coaching website is existential.coach, and you could also put a backslash psychedelic coaching if you want to learn more about integration coaching, etc. Um, rocketsupervision.com is for coaches who are looking to be better coaches. And the coaching lab you find more on gocoachinglab.com. Basically, we meet once a month and we get to sit in on somebody else's coaching session. It's so rare to get the opportunity to just know what's actually happening in the room. And we featured a couple of psychedelic integration coaches. So we had a couple of sessions where people made sense of a recent experience. It's just so rare that you get to see someone coach for 45 minutes and then analyze, debrief, dissect, get critical, celebrate. It's just so expansive of what we learn when we realize what was operating in the background. How did they experience the silence? Why did they choose a certain question and not another? And just that I love it. I love it. It's a community of practice where I hope people can expand their mind on what's possible in coaching and kind of demystify what's actually happening in the room. Open
Love
to
it. Love it.
anyone, not just coaches, by the way.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, this is exactly like we need. I feel like the industry really needs like practical, on ground,
Hmm.
from the field translations of what integration is. And I think really that could be the most accurate depiction of the methods, right? So Yannick is also offering our listeners 15% discount with the coupon code psychedelics at gocoachinglab.com. And of course, we're going to have all these links up on in the show notes and on our website page. Yannick, this was an amazing co-creation. Thank you so much for being here, appreciating all your work, and hope that you can join us again sometime soon.
Shiri, anytime. Always love talking to you. And I think there's a lot more to explore. So appreciate the space you create and everything you've been doing for psychedelic integration and for the people out there. So please keep doing what you're doing. And I hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for listening. And remember, it's not the psychedelics, it's the integration.